Beautiful. Welcome everyone to this webinar with Dr. Irene Siegel. I'm really excited to be here to explore EMDR and cognitive to cosmic interweaves. And I was very, very lucky to be gifted her book, The Sacred Path of the Therapist, Modern Healing, Ancient Wisdom and Client Transformation by a dear friend, Cassandra. And as I read this book, I really fell in love with Irene's work and reached out to her. So very lucky to have her here today. And for those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Lani Roy. I'm the founder and director of Signs of Life Psychology, which is an organisation that I started 12 years ago that has really grown and evolved as I have. And the main services we provide at the moment are really trying to build a healthy ecosystem in Australia, particularly for the field of psychedelic science, through trials and protocol development, training of therapists, and building a grassroots community with lots of events and points of connection. And yeah, really excited to open this EMDR space, our first webinar, exploring these realms, and particularly the huge passion for the transpersonal spaces. And the main mission of the Signs of Life is to really help shifting the paradigm of mental health, so that people can open up to these transpersonal fields. So if you feel okay to, we might just take a moment to close our eyes and do an acknowledgement, drop into this space together. So yeah, just taking a moment to arrive here after no doubt a busy week, potentially of providing a lot of support to clients, to people who are suffering, being here on a Saturday morning in Australian time, and acknowledging the incredible owners, traditional owners of the Australian lands and all the corners of Australia. As we do this, you might like to imagine a space that is really dear to you in Australia or anywhere in the world if you're watching this from other corners. It can be a river, the bush, a garden. For me, it's a volcano, the beach. Knowing at any moment we can close our eyes and connect into these spaces. And from a psychedelic medicine space, just acknowledging the incredible altars around the world who have sat in sacred ceremony for thousands of years by the teepee in the jungle. And as these medicines move rapidly around the world, my hope is that we can build a container, transpersonal field that can support and nourish and sustain the growth that people get through these alternative treatments. Aho. Well, over to you, Irene. I can introduce you as a doctor, a psychotherapist, a specialist in EMDR, an author, teacher, and as I'm learning about your work, just covering many, many deep transpersonal realms. And also your programs appear to be really practical for people to connect in with ways to strengthen their own relationship with the transpersonal field. And would you like to share a little bit about you?
Sure. I want to just thank you first for having me here. I was very thrilled to have you connect with me, and I could see based on your work, we are very like-minded. So I appreciate the connection from around the globe. So yes, I'm Dr. Irene Siegel. I live in New York on Long Island, and I am an EMDR consultant. I've been a speaker at their conference for many years, and I always speak about mindfulness and resonance in the therapeutic process. And I teach courses. Some of them are through EMDRIA and some of them are my own. And I teach meditation classes. And I spent many, many years working with healers, shamans in South America, going down to Peru and Bolivia and back again over about a 10-year period of time. And that was quite a while ago. But I have integrated what I do. I've worked with other healers as well from different parts of the world, and it is very integrated in me. So I have worked very hard to integrate it in my practice. So I'm going to just put up my slideshow. So just give me for a moment, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. Okay. And we're just going to start the slideshow. So this is EMDR Therapy, Cognitive to Cosmic Interweave. So I am assuming that you are all trained in EMDR, so I won't go into too much detail. But we know that EMDR is an 8-phase brain-based therapy, and it's based in an adaptive information processing model where we heal past trauma, we eliminate present triggers, and we create future templates. So by the time I took the EMDR training, which was in 1996, at that time, I had already been working with healers and meditating, and I've been a psychotherapist for many years before that. And then I took the EMDR training. And my first experience with a client using EMDR was amazing to me. So I came back from the training. I was very excited. I had a client that was already working with me because she had been molested as a child by a next door neighbor. And so we were already working with her trauma. And I said to her, I want to try something new. Now, one of the things Francine Shapiro had said over the years is EMDR was not a great name for what this is. And one of the reasons is that's just one form of bilateral stimulation. So I don't usually use eye movement. I usually use music that's made for EMDR with headphones that goes from ear to ear. And what I really like about it is that my clients can close their eyes if they choose to and sink deep within themselves. So I come back from the training, I give the client the headphones, and we're processing the scene of her being molested, and her negative cognition was, I'm not lovable. And she felt she wasn't lovable because her parents didn't take care of her enough. They didn't step in. They didn't even know this was going on for her, but she felt that she wasn't lovable. So she puts the headphones on. We start with that as the target memory and the negative cognition, and she wanted to feel as if she could be lovable. So she sinks deep within, and then I realized I was doing what I do best. I sank deep into an internal focus, okay? And I took some deep breaths, and I was just holding the energy in the room as she was processing. And what was happening for me was I was in this deep state where I started to sense the energy moving back and forth between us. I started to sense the shared field. And I could feel all this activity in the field. And I could feel something changing for her. And it reached the point where all of a sudden the energy got really calm. And I looked at her. She opened her eyes before I could even ask her to. And her eyes open really, really wide. And she says to me, oh my God, I just realized God loves me. And if God loves me, I must be lovable. I said, let's go with that. Okay. And we went with that, and she never looked back. We continued to integrate that kind of transpersonal process into this EMDR model. Now, I have to tell you that since that time, it's fairly frequent that clients will make statements like that to me in their sessions. So it came to a point where I said to myself, are other therapists having this experience? It can't just be me. And I thought, maybe I need more education to figure out what's going on. And that's when I decided to go for a PhD in transpersonal psychology, which led me to a research project that I did. But what's really interesting, what's really been happening is that, is that we're really entering a new paradigm in psychotherapy, and it really is a transpersonal paradigm. So what does that even mean? Well, transpersonal psychology is a full spectrum psychology. You know, in Western psychology, we're used to helping clients return to adaptive functioning. That's what EMDR is all about. You know, you work to process unprocessed trauma, and they start to function in a more adaptive way. But transpersonal psychology is full spectrum in that we're not looking to just have someone feel as if they could handle their world better. You know, of course, they want to alleviate their depression, their anxiety, their signs of PTSD, but it's full spectrum in terms of we work with soul energy, and soul is at the center of a healing paradigm. And consciousness awakens as the client reaches fullest potential. And the transpersonal model is based in that, in soul awareness. So it was an outgrowth of the humanistic movement, in which they realize that the soul is part of the person, but in a transpersonal model, the soul is the core of the person. And in the model that I have created in terms of my work, the therapist becomes the vibrational tool for healing through mindfulness, attunement, and resonance with the client within a field of coherent energy. So we're in a shared field with the client. And as a result of that, there's this unfoldment of transcendent dimensions of human consciousness, exceptional human experiences, mystical experiences, non-ordinary states of consciousness, and all this becomes part of the therapeutic process. So it's not seen as something dysfunctional. It's seen as the human potential unfolding. So in the field of transpersonal psychology, John Rowan, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, he created a transpersonal model of the psyche. And he talks about the instrumental consciousness, which is defined by our place in the outer world. This is ordinary consciousness, who we are. We are therapists, we are daughters, we are mothers, we are sons, we are parents. You know, this is what we identify with in the everyday world. But then there is the authentic self, and this is the self-actualized self, and it's self-defined. And this starts to reveal itself in a transpersonal model. Then there's the transpersonal self one, which is related to soul consciousness, and it's where we begin to detach from ego. Now, detaching from ego is not the same thing as dissociating from ego. It means that the ego itself becomes less identified with the outer world and really realizes its essence as light. And then there's a transpersonal self too, which is defined as our spiritual self. And it's just not defined. It's pure enlightenment and mystical union. Most of us have not experienced that in our lifetime, but there are great teachers like Christ and Buddha and the Dalai Lama that are mystics. I mean, there are great mystics from different traditions who have attained those levels of consciousness. So actually, this is from Ken Wilber. If you haven't read any of his work, he wrote Integral Psychology, and actually, you should have some handouts. One of them is a reading list, and so if I mention any references, you can find them in your reading list. And then I also gave you an article that I wrote called EMDR as a Transpersonal Therapy, a trauma-focused approach for awakening consciousness. Ken Wilber, though, he's written an encyclopedia worth of information on transpersonal developmental theory. So he talks about states of consciousness, and we are continuously shifting states of consciousness. We go from waking to dreaming, where we can have soul access, to deep sleep, and where we access the formless or the causal spirit. When we go into a meditative state, we're shifting states of consciousness. Now, when Francine Shapiro was teaching EMDR, when she first developed the training, she would say, we don't change states. Okay, we stay very alert and present. We bring in the past with the present, but we're in the present moment. But in a transpersonal model, we are shifting states, and the client is shifting states, and that's what makes it transpersonal. We shift into states of higher awareness or expanded awareness. But it can just be a momentary light bulb moment where we say, oh my God, like my client said, oh my God, God loves me. I must be lovable. But for that to become a structure of consciousness, there needs to be reinforcement of that and work with that. So structures of consciousness are levels of consciousness, such as material, biological, higher mental, spiritual. These are stable patterns found in the development, found in the level of development and the line of development. Now, we're not going to get too much into the difference of that, but for something to become a structure of consciousness, for my client to move through her world realizing that God loves her and therefore she must be lovable, it's not just one EMDR session. It's not just one moment of awareness. It's going back into those internally focused states where she can access her own higher self and work with her healing from that level of awareness. And as her therapist, I join her there. So I'm just not sitting there watching her. I'm not just writing notes. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do after the session. I meet her in those spaces. And then we have bodies of consciousness. Now, we have subtle bodies, and some of you may be familiar with these subtle bodies, which are energetic bodies that we can access in the dream state and the waking state, but in different spiritual traditions, they talk about the energy field, and that's where we get this term subtle bodies. So the transpersonal model of the psyche kind of brings together what I call a bottom-up approach with a top-down model. So I'm going to just kind of describe in just easy words to understand. And the bottom-up model is when we start with the trauma, we kind of peel away the layers. In a psychodynamic model, you peel away the layers. In EMDR, it's still bottom up. We go through the trauma. We work really within the emotional body. If we're talking about subtle bodies, the emotional body, the mental body, the physical body, and eventually it shifts what's happening in the energy field. And Western psychotherapy and religion is based in a bottom-up approach. We eventually get to the higher ranges. But in a top-down model, and this is really something that you will see in spiritual traditions, and with the healers that I've worked with, the shamans that I've worked with, they would say, we don't need therapists. We go into ceremony, we go into ritual, we go into altered states. And what they do is they shift the patterns of consciousness in the field, and that filters down into the mental body, the emotional body, and the physical body. So they say, that's why we don't need therapists. We change it on that level first, and it shifts everything. But as transpersonal therapists, and when we talk about cognitive to cosmic interweaves, you'll see what I mean about this. It's really integrating both and finding that space where we can take a really wonderful model of EMDR and integrate, and we can integrate some of the healing techniques that are done in some of these ancient wisdom traditions. So these are developmentally inclusive states of awareness, and I just want to say I'm going to give you a background in science and psychology and spirituality to help you understand. Once we get to internal resourcing in the EMDR model, you'll have a better idea of how we even got here. So bear with me as I take you through some of this. I think it's really important to tie it to what might be more familiar to us. So mindful awareness, attunement, resonance, and spiritual resonance. Mindful awareness came from Buddhism, but we don't use it in the traditional Buddhist sense. So the way I use it is I define it as the experience of bringing one's awareness within to a moment by moment experience of being present and non-attached to outcome, in which each thought, feeling, and experience is accepted for what it is. And I'll just mention that Alana is going to send you an email that has the slides on it. So don't think you have to write all of this down. you will get an email, and it's exactly what the slide says. So we start with mindful awareness. We start with that mindfulness where we go really deep inside and we're present and non-attached to outcome. And then we create this attunement between ourselves and our client. So it's this deep intuitive recognition of the emotions, the thoughts, and the feelings of the other person without the need for words. So the other person feels known, seen, and understood on multiple levels. And they join us in this experience of attunement. And on a vibrational level, if you're a meditator and you can sense energy, you start to sense the attunement in the field, almost like a musical instrument. Okay. Now, this definition of resonance is by Dan Siegel. Not my relative, unfortunately. I wish I was related to him. But he wrote the book, The Mindful Therapist. He's written a lot of great books. But if you haven't read The Mindful Therapist, it's an amazing book. So this definition was taken from that book, and I'll read you his definition of resonance. Resonance makes two a part of one system, at least temporarily. Attuning to ourselves within mindful states, we have the observing and experiencing self in resonance. Attuning to others, we open ourselves to the profound adventure of linking two as part of one interactive whole. This joining is an intimate communion of the essence of who we are as individuals, yet truly interconnected with one another. It's hard to put into words, but resonance reveals the deep reality that we are part of a larger whole, that we need one another, and in some ways, that we are created by the ongoing dance within, between, and among us. When you have a moment, reread this in the handout that you're going to get. So this I took from the internet. This is not Dan Siegel, but I thought it was a great diagram to help understand resonance in the field. So A on the left is the therapist, B on the right is the client, and we have all of these ranges of energy in between. Everything from the tightest range that brings us into the everyday reality and the details of the world, and then the larger expanded ranges. And this is all going on at the same time. And we want to be able to perceive. So usually we're trained to perceive in those smaller ranges, you know, to speak with the client, to look at the client, to get a good history, to do an assessment. But we're not taught how to expand within ourselves and help the client expand into those higher ranges. So in science, Laszlo actually has identified the biofield as the energy field that extends beyond the body and into the environment, transcending time and space, holding memory and influencing evolution. So science is starting to catch up with what we know from spiritual traditions. This is not Laszlo's. This again, I think this is actually from HeartMath. This came from the internet, and this is a really good diagram of the biofield. We see that we have energy that's closer to the physical body. Everything runs through the core, through our spine, through the heart, and then we have an expanded field that reaches out beyond us and to every living thing in our world, and even beyond that. So in neuroscience, there's been a lot of research on heart-brain coherence. So Tiller, actually, he wrote like a textbook on this. It really reads like a textbook, so it's not easy reading. But he's done a lot of experimentation on the etheric field, the subtle fields of the human body. And he says that the etheric and subtle fields of the human body are an antenna for electromagnetic energy transmitted through the interaction between the endocrine and the chakra system, and that the heart is the strongest electromagnetic oscillator of the human body. There is a radiation of energy transmitted outward from this heart antenna, and he suspects that great healers such as Christ, the Dalai Lama, Buddha, that they have had huge heart energy antennas. And many years ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, but a while ago, the Dalai Lama actually came to New York and he spoke at a stadium, and the entire stadium was filled. And when people left the stadium, they were interviewed. Everybody felt as if they were transformed. How does one do that? You have to have a really strong heart energy. Now, we, as therapists, we open our heart to our clients. So there is that energy. We do it on a smaller level, but we can do it. And when we do it consciously, amazing things can happen. So, I'm sorry, wait a minute. I forgot one thing to tell you here. McCready and Childrey, they are with HeartMath. Now, HeartMath has done a ton of research on heart-brain coherence. And they say that when the heart and the brain are in sync, or in coherence, and this happens in a meditative state, then it leads to coherence and integration throughout all systems of the body. Okay, they believe that this coherence moves from the heart to the brain and not the other way around. And so here, this is also HeartMath. When somebody comes in, one of our clients comes in, like my client who says, I'm not lovable, and they're really dealing with the stress of trauma, post-traumatic stress, and it's been unprocessed material, and the belief, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. This indicates cortical inhibition. There's an incoherence in the field. And they kind of loop around and loop around. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not lovable. But when heart rhythmic patterns are actually monitored, this is what it looks like. The one on top, which says frustration. And when they get into more of a state of coherence, which is what happens in EMDR, with bilateral stimulation, with reprocessing trauma, there's cortical facilitation, which allows other awarenesses to come forward. So my client who said, oh my God, God loves me, I must be lovable, her brain did not have the capacity to go there before this experience. Okay. And then people start to feel a sense of appreciation. And I can't tell you how many clients have said to me in retrospect that their trauma was the beginning of their awakening, and that it started them on their spiritual path. So this is Dan Siegel again. He talks about the triangle of well-being that he calls triception. And I'm going to go over this because I bring it up again a little bit later. This is from the Mindful Therapist as well. And he says that triception, when you have mind, brain, and relationship, that's when clients can transform. So transception is the way we perceive the flow of energy and information within this triangle of well-being. So we perceive this flow as it moves through the nervous system, where the brain is the mechanism of flow, as it's monitored and modified, and the mind becomes the regulator of the energy, and as it is communicated among people. And for that, you have to have relationship. So clients cannot transform without the relationship. As this is a triangle of not just energy and information flow, but of well-being, triception is the way we perceive our states of integration, and then move the system from chaos and or rigidity towards the harmony of integrative flow. And this is a triangle of an integrated brain, an empathic relationship, and a coherent, resilient mind. Keep this in mind, because I'm going to bring it up again as we move into a transpersonal model. So this again, this is not Dan Siegel's. This is from the internet, and this is a picture of two people that are in coherence. You can see how their energy fields are mirroring one another, and there's a flow, and there's an openness, and there's a communication on an energy level. So the way I use the term resonance is mostly related to spirituality. And in spiritual traditions, they believe that all is vibrational and interconnected within an energy field. They believe this in Sufism, in integral yoga, indigenous healings of Native American Indian tradition, emissaries of divine light, which they are an international group, and then even modern energy healing schools. Okay, talk about how everything is vibrational and interconnected within a field. So it's through the practice of mindful awareness that this expanded experience begins to reveal itself. So there's been transpersonal research on the shared field. Both William Broad and Jean Achterberg did experiments, research studies on non-local healing. Broad, within his career, did over 300 research projects where he would have one person in a room transmitting an emotion or transmitting or looking at a picture, and someone else like a mile away where they would be the receiver, and it wouldn't just be a subjective reporting. I mean, a lot of bodily functions were tested, like skin conductivity and breathing patterns, and things that are part of the autonomic nervous system would be tracked as different emotions were transmitted. Jean Achterberg actually took some shamans from the jungle and brought them to her research lab and found that when they were doing non-local healing, she had them hooked up to an MRI, changes in the brain would happen. So I'm having these extraordinary experiences with my clients. I decide to go back to school. So I go back to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which today is called Sophia University, and I had to do a research study. So this is what I wanted to do a study on. It was on spiritual resonance, and it was called The Therapist as a Container for Spiritual Resonance and the Observed Impact on Client Transformation. So I'm going to go through this with you so that this way you understand how I work. And when we get to resourcing, it will start to make sense. So I had therapists join the study who felt that they had some understanding of what they believed spiritual resonance was. So I first asked them, I asked them, what is your definition of spiritual resonance? Let's start there. And they first said, and this is pretty much across the board, they first said, well, it's an attunement to the divine, and it's always present. So it's not just present when we're in a therapy session, it's present wherever we go, it's in the field. And that it is vibrational in nature. It's based in higher vibration and higher frequency with soul awareness. So there's actually patterns in the energy field that are based in higher frequency, and that it's a central core of a philosophy of wholeness. So you can't divide it into the sum of its parts. It's the central core of wholeness. And then I said to them, explain to me what happens to you. What's the interdynamic between you and your client? And so out of that came 10 themes. And so I'm going to go through these themes with you. So the first theme is the therapist attunement as a doorway to spiritual resonance. Meaning, so for example, for myself, when I sit with a client, I'll just say this also, I studied and have been a teacher for many, many years for the organization Luminescence, where I teach a program called Awakening Your Light Body. So I've learned for years, and I've taught for years, how to awaken centers close to a soul level and how to move that energy and expand my field. So personally, I do this, but other therapists do different things. So in order to find that attunement to spirit, I get very quiet. I just bring up the energy. I feel myself expanding. Some therapists say they just go into meditation or they use imagery. One image that I like to use, which we're going to do later because there's a whole experiential thing I'm going to do with you. We connect to the earth. We connect to our own solar star. We get energy moving, and then they bring it into session. Or they might just take 3 deep breaths, and they might even do it with the client. 3 deep breaths with internal focus. Notice your body, relax your body. We start to create that attunement with the divine. Now, you don't have to worry if the client does it or not. This is not an expectation of the client. When the client is ready, the client will meet you there. So we open the door. And then the second theme was that there are internal feedback mechanisms that we use as skills that we use to determine intervention. And these are skills of alternative knowing. So for example, when I talked about my client. I sensed her energy. I felt it in the field. I saw light coming into the room. The light expanded in the room. Everybody has different internal senses that work for them. But I use those senses as feedback to help me know, when do I stop the processing? When do I ask the client to tell me what's coming up? Or when do I let the client just continue to process? So it isn't, and so this is one way in which I don't follow exactly the protocol, because not a certain set, okay, of bilateral turns. It's really based on what's happening in the field. And this becomes a nonlinear process of assessment and healing. So for example, in shamanism, when a shaman assesses the energy field of the person they're healing, they're also healing it at the same time. They're bringing it into balance. And that's kind of what's happening. We're helping the client come into balance. And all of the therapists said there's an internal focus of attention for therapist and for client. It's not just the therapist, okay? It's therapist and client, which is why I like to use the headphones. You could use tappers, you could do other things that will allow the client to close their eyes. So in that internal focus is where the magic happens. And this is where expanded consciousness can start to take shape. The therapist's next theme is the therapist's awareness of internal emotions, sensations, and cognition. So I said to the therapist, what do you feel as you're in this experience with your clients? And they gave me all kinds of feelings. They feel expansive. They feel joy. They feel unconditional love. They feel a quickening. They feel a centeredness. They feel a connection to spirit. And all of this can be happening at the same time. But in order for this to happen, the therapist needs to be detached from ego. So for example, you have to let go of the cognitive thought, what do I do next with this client? I want to be a good therapist. What am I supposed to do in this next step? Because now you're in your egoic mind, you're in your everyday thought. So it's detaching from the ego and just being present with the client. And it's in those spaces that changes happen. And once you can be detached from your own ego and not worry about what's going to happen, you can let go of attachment to goals, expectations, and outcome. Now, this is really important. When we start with a client, of course, we want to set some goals. We create a treatment plan. Why is the client coming in? If they're depressed or anxious or suffering from PTSD, we want to reprocess trauma. We want to get to the target memories that we need to get to reprocess. We want to move the negative cognitions to the positive cognitions. We want to release body memory. I mean, all of that, we set goals. But when we're actually in the processing and there's quiet space, client gets quiet, we get quiet, and that's where we let go of expectation. I have one client, he's been in and out of my practice for as long as I've been in practice. And when he was referred to me, I started actually working in a psychiatric hospital, in an acute unit when I started my career. And so I was very familiar with severe diagnoses of mental illness. And he came to me from an emergency room. He was referred to me, psychiatric emergency room. And he, probably of all my clients, has the most severe diagnosis. And he's been on medication all these years. But he's been my greatest teacher because I have let go of my expectation of him. Now, if you saw his life now, when I met him, he was not functioning at all. I mean, he had a really part-time job that was targeted for someone with a disability. He had trouble getting out of bed. He missed a lot of work. His supervisor was very understanding because it was slotted for someone with a disability. But he's got a steady job. He married someone who loves him very much. They have a fairly decent income together. They live in a nice place. He's still not exactly a happy person, okay? So he's still got work to do, but he has far surpassed what I would have thought the goals were for him. And more recently, I would say over the last 6 months, he's been just having these spiritual awarenesses that he brings into session. And it is mind-boggling to me. So take the cap off of your goal and expectation. Now, I asked all of these therapists, I said, do you feel that there's transference and countertransference that shows up in the therapy sessions? And they said no. Now, of course, we're not, even with EMDR, we're not using a psychodynamic model. So you don't really work with transference and countertransference the way you would in a psychodynamic model. But what they did say is that if the therapist becomes too caught in their egoic mind, that's when transference and countertransference can come to the surface. And then, of course, as a therapist, you need to deal with it. But with EMDR, we know that it doesn't show up in the same way because we're dealing with family of origin, we're dealing with early childhood, we're dealing with ego states. And so the projection onto the therapist, whether it's this exalted projection or a negative projection, doesn't happen in the same way as in a more psychodynamic model. And so with my client who said, oh my God, God loves me, she was resonating with spirit, however she defines that. And I let my clients define it. I don't use a spiritual language unless they do. And I don't even explain what I'm doing internally unless they have an experience and they want to talk about it. So, and they do need to talk about it. So the last theme is the integration of the egoic mind and the expanded consciousness as a tool for change. They need to talk about it because they want to understand it, but more than that, they want validation that they're not crazy. So I'll give you an example. A client we were working with, this kind of leads me into what we're talking about, resourcing. A client that I was working with, we were working with internal ego parts, and there was a part of him that was really a saboteur. And we were trying to help that saboteur integrate into the larger internal family. And that saboteur was like outside of the family circle. And then as we're processing, something changed for the client. All of a sudden, he was focusing on images. And he said light was coming through, flowers were coming out of his head. He couldn't figure out what that was. And he had to say to me, do you think I'm crazy that flowers are coming out of my head? I said, do you feel crazy? He goes, no. I said, I don't think you're crazy. Let's just go with that. And he continued. And he just worked with the images in the field. And then he needed to talk about it. And especially the next session, he needed to talk about it because that saboteur was no longer a saboteur and was somehow integrated into the internal family. So talking about it is really important. Clients need to know that you don't think they're crazy, so they don't think they're crazy. And then, of course, we could move from there. So what happens to a client? How do they transform? Well, we know with EMDR that transformation can be pretty significant. But what starts to happen from a transpersonal approach is that there's a development of spiritual consciousness that evolves. So clients' inner wisdom comes to the surface. They start to view their life through a spiritual lens. And this changes their identification in the world, how they see the world, how they see their family of origin and their position in that family, and how they view their trauma. This is when clients say to me, my trauma was the beginning of my spiritual path. And they feel a sense of gratitude for it. With EMDR, we see emotional and cognitive healing, of course. We see that a lot. So for example, my client who said, oh my God, God loves me. She was just in this state of acceptance very quickly about her family, about her parents. They did the best they could. They couldn't be there for me, but I know I'm lovable. There's physical healing and transformation. The therapist I interviewed, plus my own experience, is we've seen health issues really subside as a result of bringing a transpersonal flavor into the EMDR protocol. So clients with tumors, clients with allergies, clients with autoimmune systems, you use the physical body as the doorway in, and you're holding that resonance, and something changes in terms of not just healing body memory, but there's a change in the field that starts to change the disease process. Not for everyone, okay? And again, there's no judgment here. We're not judging, and we're letting go of expectation. It's not my job to cure my client. It's my job to heal my client. And there's a difference between healing and a difference between healing and a difference between helping the client to just find their highest goal. So I do want to say something, and I will say this. I'll probably say it again because Lani brought it up at the beginning. Some people on my mailing list, unfortunately, you're coming in an hour late because I didn't realize Australia changed their clocks, but this is recorded. So I see Bonnie came in. Hi, Bonnie. Glad to have you here. Okay. But you're kind of coming in the middle, but it will be recorded. So we might have more people who are doing the same. So just so you're aware. Okay. So I hope you enjoy what you hear, and we have an experiential part, and then you can go back and listen to the recording. Very sorry for that. Okay, there's improved coping skills, obviously, and those improved coping skills help one deal more easily with what's going on in their world, because now their reference point is their soul, and their path is seen as a path of initiation. Behavioral changes, people feel more acceptance and love for the people in their world, and there's vibrational changes. Client works into your office, and you see the light in their field. You just sense it. You know, it's like we all have this experience where if you're in a crowded room and someone walks in and they have a heavy energy, everybody turns around to see what happened. Same thing, client walks into your office and their light is bright, you know it, and they know it, and people in their world know it, and people comment about that. Okay, what's happening? Why is this not? Here we go. Oops. There we go. Okay. So client comes in looking like this person on the left, where their energy field is really contracted, and you take them through an EMDR process with transpersonal protocol, and their field expands. So as a result of this study, a definition of spiritual resonance has evolved, and I'm going to read it to you. Spiritual resonance is defined as a vibrational pattern accessed by soul awareness, a central core of life and not just healing, a vibrational fabric from which healing and life emerge, and it is not component-based. It's perceived as a gift to the receiver, and the potential for realization is present in all. It's realized through an experience of expanded awareness. It's nonlinear in nature, transcending time and space. The therapist and client become transmitters of this range of energy within the therapy session. So within the vibrational range of spiritual resonance, the client has the choice to resonate with that range of frequency, disidentifying with ego, changing perception, and transforming within the unified experience of cosmic wholeness. So ultimately, transmission of spiritual resonance is multidirectional between therapist, client, and a divine cosmic source. Okay. So the transpersonal therapist, actually this is a quote by Francis Vaughan. For the transpersonal therapist, consciousness is both the instrument and object of change. The work aims not only at changing behavior and the contents of consciousness, but also at developing awareness of consciousness itself as the context of experience. Okay. So the transpersonal therapist learns what Wellwood would call double vision, which he defines it as creating a balance of perception between the freedom of transcendent truth and the limitations of the immanent truth of the human domain. So what that means is we see through the egoic mind the ordinary state of awareness, we see our client, and we can shift perceptions to a more expanded state where we can tune into what's happening within the energy field. So this is my diagram, and I will just explain the soul's journey. So on the left, we have the unaware person, and I'll just say, because Petra, you just came on, unfortunately, Australia changed their clocks and I didn't realize. So we started an hour ago, but this is recorded, so you can listen into the recording. Okay, so sorry about that. Glad you're here.
I'm
Okay.
letting everyone know, Irene. So if new people drop in, I'll just type to them and let them know for you.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. So on our everyday personality journey, you see the lower left, you know, we kind of circle around our egoic mind. And this is very much EMDR. We work with trauma of the past to put it in the past, to bring our consciousness more into the present, you know, to move more into the future template. But it's still the journey of the personality. The veil between the world is still pretty thick. And we can certainly accomplish adaptive functioning, and the client can feel much better and feel healed in a lot of ways. But they're still separate from soul awareness. When a client starts to awaken, they start to move from their everyday consciousness into the consciousness of their soul. Okay? And what that means is, like my client who said, "Oh my God, God loves me," you can't forget that. You can't go back and forget that. So now there's always that part that starts to come in. So when we're talking about resourcing, and really we're gonna focus mostly on the resourcing aspect of EMDR therapy. When we talk about resourcing, we're talking about drawing from soul consciousness and bringing that into a transpersonal EMDR model. So my client opened to feel her connection to spirit, to God, she called, you know, whatever it means for her, but she brought it right back in to the processing of her trauma. And that veil doesn't close. And if we work in those spaces, it only continues to expand. So let's talk about transpersonal resourcing. So now you have some background. Okay. And all of this is in my book. If you want to read it and understand it more deeply, the Sacred Path of the Therapist. So you can get a lot more information that way too. So we're going to talk about cognitive to cosmic interweave. So let's talk about what that means. So we may do a lot of resourcing in phase 2, and but you're gonna see that you can bring this into many phases as well. So hopefully we all know what a cognitive interweave is. So as an example, if we have a client that keeps looping around, a client, let's say, that was sexually abused as a 5-year-old, and they say, "I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, I'm bad," and they loop around, and then you say to them, "Well, do you know another 5-year-old?" And they'll say yes. I'll say, "Well, if something happened to that child, would you think they're bad? Would you think they're a bad person? Would you think there's something wrong with them?" And they'll say, "No, of course not." And then you go with that and say, "Then can you know that about yourself?" And that's a cognitive interweave. So you break through the looping by bringing in a process where their brain starts to just process it differently because they have a different reference point. Cognitive interweave is what we've been talking about so far. So one of the most important cognitive cosmic interweaves is holding a field of coherent energy and information flow. Now, you can do this in every phase of EMDR, even in history taking. I start, I'm calm, I'm centered. If my client gets activated because they're telling their story, I just get calmer. Okay? There might be times where we want to have our client take 3 deep breaths. We want to help calm them down. But when you hold open that calm, centered field, you'll notice how they start to calm down. And this applies to every phase of EMDR. Meditation and mindfulness is another cosmic interweave. So let's say you have a client that really needs to calm down. I might do a short guided imagery with them, having them connect to the earth, having them connect to spirit, to the stars, and creating that alignment. And that starts to calm them down as well. And within those states of meditation, I'll call it meditation. I mean, they could even be using bilateral stimulation, but we're in those higher states. They might find teachers and guides in those states that are resources for them. So, but this is the spiritual resonance. So a client starts to resonate. I'm going to talk about one client, and I have some short clips about her, but I'll tell you about her as an example so you have some background about her. This client came to me. She had been in a terrible motorcycle accident a year earlier. She was in therapy with a therapist who felt that she wasn't healing the trauma and that this woman needed EMDR. And she was riding on the back of her boyfriend's motorcycle, and a car turned right into them. And her boyfriend died in the trauma, and she ended up in the hospital. She was in a coma for a little while, and she actually lost the use of her arm. So that was a terrible trauma for her. When I started working with her, and the first initial scene was the scene in the hospital. She woke up in the hospital. Somehow she just sensed that her boyfriend died, but she saw people around her. Now, this was a woman who came from a Hispanic background. She felt she had an older brother, but she felt like she was the older sibling. She was the parentified child. She had to be the strong one. And people were surrounding her hospital bed, and she felt shame that she needed this kind of emotional support and physical caring. And she just felt like, I'm supposed to be the strong one here. So with her, when I first started working with her, we started using that as the initial target memory. Her negative belief at that point was, I'm weak. And she closes her eyes. We target that. I'm running the energy. And all of a sudden, I feel her energy, waves of energy. Now, it usually does not happen that way. I'll tell you that. It doesn't usually happen that way. For her, the resonance was right there. To the point where, when we started talking, her eyes were open wide, and she goes, "Oh my God," she goes, "I felt you right here, but you're like over there in your chair." She said, "What was that?" Okay. And I have to tell you, I don't give a lot of explanation. I'll say, "Well, what did it feel like for you?" And she'll define it. And I'll say, "Well, was that comfortable for you?" And she'll say, "Yeah." And I'll just basically say, "Let's go with that." And usually they don't ask me for anything more. If they asked me for more, I would answer their questions, but they usually don't. So that was the spiritual resonance. The spiritual resonance itself is an amazing resource that gets interwoven into every aspect. When we do some ego state work from that space, often what I'll do is I'll map out what I call the internal family. We'll look at the parts of the client that are strong and the parts of the client that are supportive and support their greatest health. And then, of course, the parts that struggle and get in the way and have a difficult time in the world. And depending upon the level of dissociation, I mean, if there's high levels of dissociation, I will often I will have them say, I would say to them, "I want you to imagine a part of yourself that exists beyond these personality parts." Some clients will say right away, "Oh, that's my higher self." Others won't say that. They'll say, "Oh, that's kind of like a manager or my coach," or they'll say something, and whatever it is, it's fine. And they bring in this part who becomes an amazing co-therapist. So I have had my clients bring in higher selves or spiritual beings, the most associative clients, and it really helps to heal the part of the self that is not integrated. And of course, we do almost like a family therapy, but that higher self might bring in a light. And I'll say, you don't have to figure out how this part of you is going to help this group. They know exactly what to do. I'm holding the energy. They're just watching, and they start to observe what's happening. I have one really highly dissociative client now. She brings in Jesus Christ. She brings in a divine spirit. And little by little, aspects of herself that she couldn't even touch because it was too painful, little by little, she's becoming more integrated without a lot of words. We use whatever she talks about. It's not a lot of words, a lot of images. It could be color, it could be form, it could be lights. Teachers and guides can come in as internal resources. I've had that happen. Now, as someone who has studied native tradition of Incan descent, I often work with internal forces of nature, major archetypes of nature, guides, teachers that are my guides and teachers. And amazingly, my clients will close their eyes and process, and they will describe a teacher that comes forward. Now, it sounds like my teacher, but I don't say anything. I just go with them. This is their resource. I'm not claiming their resource. I'm opening the door for that resource. They'll talk about power animals. They'll say, gee, this jaguar just came forward, and I'll say, you know what? That jaguar could be an amazing teacher. Let's bring in the jaguar. What is that jaguar here to teach you? What does that jaguar want you to know? And they start to get introduced to these forces of nature. So when I talk about cosmic interweaves, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about interweaves that we can use based in higher consciousness, non-ordinary mind, and expanded awareness. We can heal through symbols. This goes back to the man who I told you had flowers coming out of his head. I don't need to know what that means. He didn't know what it meant. Didn't matter. There was an energy, a color, a frequency in that for him that indicated that he was healing on the level of the field that is based in symbols. I mean, Jung wrote about this, healing through symbols. When you can heal, it's like one picture's worth 1,000 words. That's really true in this process. One picture is worth 1,000 words. So an image, a color, a form, a healing light. Francine Shapiro went through this exercise with her clients. She would call it healing light, and she would ask the client to bring in their favorite color light. Well, I do it a little differently. I don't ask them to bring in their favorite color light because I don't want them to predetermine the color of the light. Each color light holds a different frequency. I don't know what color light they need. I will say, let's bring in a healing light and just notice what color it is. And they will bathe in that healing light while they're processing, and things change. So it's really kind of interesting because on the one hand, they are expanding their boundaries into a non-ordinary state of being. We're sharing a shared field. So there's an emotional and energetic connection. But at the same time, their boundaries in the outer world become more solid. And the reason this happens is because they're starting to learn to use their own energy field as a resource. And I will even take clients through an imagery of connecting to the earth, connecting to their own soul, their star, and finding that energy that rises along the spine, and teaching them to use that in the everyday world. And I might even use imagery with them. So if a client has a mother who sucks their energy, I'll have them get into the state of expanded awareness, find their mother as energy, slowly bring the image closer and closer until it feels intrusive. And then I have the client go back to their own field and expand their field. And what starts to happen is they start to be able to be in the presence of the mother without allowing the mother to be their tuning fork. They're the tuning fork for their own energy field, okay? They're not attuning to the mother. kind of like with us, with the client, we are the tuning fork to our own spiritual resonance. We're not using the client as a tuning fork, or we'd be in a state of depression and anxiety. We want to be able to hold our energy steady. And as a result of that, a result of holding our energy steady, we are holding an energetic boundary, because the energy we're holding is higher in frequency than the energy that's trying to be intrusive. So it can be a very creative way of working, but again, you need a client who can go there. And I never force this on anybody. I do think there's a transpersonal mirroring that's happening where, as I hold open the energy, I notice when I record myself, and you'll see that in a few minutes, when I record myself, I notice that my hands are open. And then I notice my clients do the same thing. I never told them to do that, but they do that. And I feel the energy that's held between the two of us. So there's a level of positive functional dissociation where we're stepping into a part of us that's not the usual egoic state. We're in an expanded state. We bring the client from chaos to ego restructuring from a level of higher integration. Now, here we are back at Daniel Siegel's Triangle of Well-Being. And the reason I talked about it earlier is because it's a beautiful triangle of well-being, but what I feel is missing is the transpersonal piece. Okay. So when I wrote my book, I wrote to Dan Siegel and I said, do you mind if I use your model and just modify it a little bit? And here's what I want to do with it. And he said it was actually okay. So I'm going to just keep in mind his triangle. Here's my triangle. And this is a triangle of non-local mind. When you take spirit or a divine cosmic source on one point, heart, which is higher mind, and earth energies, which is the forces of nature, there is the opportunity for non-local mind. When you take that triangle of non-local mind and you impose it over Dan Siegel's triangle, now you have the doorway to soul awareness. So you're working with a brain-based therapy. You're working with brain, mind, and relationship to create a triangle of well-being. You're working with non-local mind. And that's when a client says to me, they go from I'm not lovable to I am lovable to I am love to I am light to I am. And it's because we're holding open this doorway. And there will be time for questions. So whatever your questions are, write them down and we will have time to discuss it. So the therapist can prepare to do the session, use the following skills in all phases of EMDR protocol to create an experience of mindful awareness, and that's meditation, imagery, deep breathing and centering, attunement to what may be described as a greater interconnected cosmic whole. So in the transpersonal EMDR protocol, all phases of EMDR protocol is viewed from a transpersonal perspective. It allows for soul essence to emerge and installation as positive resources throughout all stages. When a client starts to say to you, I am love, I am light, what great positive resources. I pick right up on that and I will install that with them. We want to make sure that the SUDS is down to a 0, that the VOC is a 7, and the client is not just moving through their personality journey, but their soul journey entwines with their work. It's a nonlinear, non-sequential flowing of a transpersonal process which emerges as the client mirrors internal focus and states of consciousness. So goals shift from healing symptoms to reaching full potential. Positive cognition expands with awareness. Transpersonal cognitive interweaves are used. Inner wisdom emerges to change perception of the history. Functional dissociation and ego detachment is a road to healing trauma through higher integration. And processing of personal, collective, and archetypal patterns can happen. We don't have time to get into all of that today, but you can go pretty deep with it. Okay, so each phase of the protocol allows the therapist to be in this expanded state. We are entrained energetically and vibrationally. The client is invited into it. Again, there's no expectation, there's no judgment. We move fluidly from egoic to expanded awareness throughout the session. Alternative ways of knowing are used as internal feedback mechanisms, which are used to track the information and energy flow within this triangle of well-being, and it is detached from expectation. So we use our internal senses, our internal ways of knowing, and we share a mutually resonant energy field that allows the client to do the same. So the context and the reference point becomes the client's inner wisdom based on an expanded awareness of an interconnected cosmic whole. The consciousness of the therapist is a determining factor in the expansion of a shared field within an experience of expanded awareness. The therapist becomes what's called a rainbow bridge. We talk about the rainbow bridge with we talk about actually the jaguar in Incan tradition as the rainbow bridge with its hind legs in the physical world, its forelegs in the world of spirit, and we walk across that bridge. I believe EMDR as a transpersonal therapy is that rainbow bridge. So it's an integration of brain-based therapy with spiritual consciousness, leading to a top-down integrated with a bottom-up approach to psychotherapy. I want to show you two quick videos. Then we will take a break, and then we're going to have an experiential piece. And we started 10 minutes late. So Lani, is it okay if we go 10 minutes beyond the hour? Is that okay? Okay. So in this video, this is the client I was telling you about that was in the motorcycle accident. Now, at the time that I took these videos, she had been in therapy with me for a long time. She stopped, she moved, she came back. She was in my meditation group for a while. She went from smoking pot socially every day to meditating every day. She left Long Island. She moved to Sedona, Arizona, which is a real high spiritual place here in the United States. And then she eventually came back again. And at the time that I did this video with her, she was considering going to Florida to have her arm worked with a special practitioner who felt that he could help her regain access of the arm. You'll see she doesn't have the use of one of her arms. So in this video, pay attention to the spiritual resonance. We use inner healers, teachers, and guides, inner vision, and listening to the whisper of the soul. And you'll see how our inner wisdom comes forward.
Let's just go back to where we were. Let's just touch in on that. The scene where your relationship ends. I'm not enough. But this time, I want you to bring in your spirit team. Just observe what happens.
So you see how I'm holding the energy with her? And she's listening to bilateral music with headphones. The music goes from ear to ear.
So the visual I get is like instantly being like guarded.
Mm-hmm.
Like they stand around me, and it's the feeling of like being protected or.
Okay, so it's a protective thing as they stand around you.
Yeah, like it's not. What I heard, it's like it's not you. You're not enough. It's not that you're not enough. Like.
Stay with it some more. Notice what happens.
It's like a redirection.
Okay.
And so when it felt like I'm being redirected, like the group is around me, like just redirecting my life towards something else that it has nothing to do with not being enough. And then I asked them, I'm like, so what do I do with the feeling? Like, okay, I guess I can understand and accept and appreciate being redirected in all of life from 4 years old to now, and not make it a personal thing.
Right.
What do I do with the feeling of like the rejection or the, and they said, well, that's the work, but it's a personal work. It's not one that comes externally.
Well, the belief I'm not enough comes from you. That's in you. That is the work.
Right, that's the personal
Right, that's the personal work. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
I have it somehow, and it's still present. I can still feel it. I have it somehow that I'm not enough for them, whoever it is. Like in childhood, my dad choosing to drink and drive and then go to jail was somehow, I wasn't enough for him to choose to not do that. His love for me wasn't enough for him to choose to change, to stay present in my life. Or my brother deciding to get in all sorts of trouble and also be sent away. Somehow I'm not enough. Like he didn't love me enough to just want to stay and play inside with me instead of going to the streets and getting in trouble. Like it, so that it sits with me somehow that it's who I am is not enough for them to make whatever change.
So you're responsible for their choices.
Somehow.
Somehow. Okay.
Okay. So you can start to see how and she's amazing, start to bring in a transpersonal resourcing into the process. Same client, okay? Now we're going to talk about her higher self, earth energy. We use a healing light, transpersonal installation. And in this segment, I'll just tell you that over time, because she really started having these experiences, she really wanted to meditate, and her friends and family just could not relate to what was going on with her. She didn't want to go out drinking with them anymore. She wanted to meditate. So I actually invited her into a meditation group that I teach. And I do teach a meditation group every Monday night. It's a Native American Indian medicine wheel meditation group. And at the time, this was pre-COVID, I was doing it in my office. Now I do it online, and I got people from all over coming to this meditation group. But I invited her in, and so she talks about an awareness that came up for her in the meditation group, just so you know that that's what she is referring to. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I want you really to just notice how she uses these resources.
So let's just stay with it. I want you to just notice your connection to the earth. Notice your connection to the higher part of yourself. See if you can bring up that life force energy. Notice a light from above, whatever color it presents itself to you. And just observe what happens in your arm, in your field. And what's coming up?
So there's like, like rays of sunshine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it feels like there's more of that like making its way through this side of my body,
Mm-hmm.
like breaking up the smoke.
Okay.
I don't know if it's smoke, but
That's what it
like.
seems like. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. So then, if you go back to that image, however you see it now, you and your brother, and the statement, I'm dirty and gross, how stressful does that feel right now?
This was the image from meditation.
I want to say two, and there's a part of me that's like wanting to make it more dramatic, if that makes any sense. Like I'm supposed to feel bad.
Oh.
Like this reality says that is a bad thing and that I should be a victim of like abuse and I should be suffering and like that's like what happens when people get child abuse or sexual abuse. And I don't feel that way. I feel like, well, we were kids and kids do stuff and
Oops, sorry about that. I just wanted to interrupt this for a moment because she had an image. She was very little. She was a little girl. Her brother was a little girl. And she imagined him on top of her. And that's what she's talking about. But I'll also just let you know that she had memories. Well, she suspects that there are early repressed memories of her father sexually abusing her. And I think that's where some of her feelings are coming from, because she and her brother were basically just being playful during this. So let me start this again.
So let's just stay with it. I want you to just notice your connection to the earth.
Oops.
Notice your connection to the higher part of. Mm-hmm.
like breaking up the smoke.
Okay.
I don't know if it's smoke, but
that's what it
like.
Seems like. Okay,
Yeah.
That's fine. So then, if you go back to that image, however you see it now, you and your brother, and the statement, I'm dirty and gross, how stressful does that feel right now?
I want to say two, and there's a part of me that's like wanting to make it more dramatic, if that makes any sense. Like I'm supposed to feel bad.
Oh.
Like this reality says that is a bad thing and that I should be a victim of like abuse and I should be suffering and like that's like what happens when people get child abuse or sexual abuse. And I don't feel that way. I feel like, well, we were kids and kids do stuff and
Well, that's right. So, I want you to just sit with it some more. Notice you were just kids. Kids do stuff. And I want you to notice a positive statement about you. You said to me earlier, I'd like to feel innocent. Notice what you feel.
I do feel innocent.
Okay. Just go with that.
They just create this weird pattern though of like he feels bad, so I try to make him feel better. And then I do that in life in like my intimate relationships. It's like they're assholes for whatever reason.
Right.
They're choosing to be assholes. And then since I don't really take it all, I forgive fairly easily. I don't hold on to things, and I move through, and then I find myself consoling them for them being assholes for whatever. And I do that.
So you put aside your own feelings.
Well, I feel like I don't really, like, it's like, okay, it happened, and I'm sad, and I cry about it, and I yell, and I scream, and I shift it, and then I'm like, okay. Or maybe I don't deal with them. I don't know. Maybe a bit of both.
Maybe. So in this particular image, what does it look like now when you look at that scene that came up in meditation?
Well, now every time I close my eyes, I keep seeing like my little. Like, I was gonna call him my little brother. He feels like my little brother. I'm like, but I keep seeing him like this, and I'm like, it's okay, you know, and that's where I keep going to now.
Yeah.
It's not the same image anymore.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And are you okay?
I really do feel like okay. I don't feel. It felt worse when I wasn't saying anything.
Right.
Now it's like, oh, okay, got that out.
Okay.
You know? Like,
so it feels better just talking about it.
yeah, in a non-judgmental space, in a space where no one's feeling sorry for me.
So you can see how some of those transpersonal, cognitive to cosmic interweaves are brought into therapy. For this particular client, she was just she and her brother were like really young. They were like 3 and 4 years old. I mean, they were just playing. But I do think there was some mimicking of some abuse happening in the family, and that this was just a screen memory for that. So I would like to give you an experiential exercise. Do you need 5 minutes before we go into like a meditation? All right, let's take a 5-minute break. And then I'm going to take you into a guided meditation, and then we'll still have time for questions and answers. Okay? Okay. I will see you shortly. Okay, we ready to begin? Okay, so I want everybody to just get comfortable. We're going to do a short meditation and then we'll have time for some questions and answers. And I'm just going to take you into a process of what I was describing, kind of connecting to the earth, connecting to the higher part of yourself, starting to feel the resonance, and get comfortable. And take 3 deep breaths. Hold the breath. Slowly let it go. And I want you to imagine a root like the root of a tree reaching down from the base of your spine deep into the earth. And in the center of the earth is a ball of silver light, and that's the earth energy. And bring this silver light up the root into the spine, up your spine and into your heart. And from your heart, send that light out to every cell of your body. Every cell of your body. And up above is a beautiful golden star. And that star is you, your higher self, your angelic presence. And there's a beam of light coming down from that star, down in through the top of your head and into your heart. And from your heart, send that light out to every cell of your body. Every cell of your body. Now with all of your awareness, follow that golden light back to that star, bringing all of your awareness into that star. All of your awareness into that star. And feel your consciousness expanding larger and larger as that star expands larger and larger. And we call forth the light of our solar star. This is our soul. And we open to the light. We receive the light. And we are the light. And as we bathe in the light of our solar star, notice your energy field, the colors, the patterns, and the radiance of your field. And as you expand into that state of awareness, notice how you sense it. Do you feel a tingling in your body through your hands? Do you feel an expansiveness? Do you see colors or lights? Notice what internal senses are natural to you. And notice how large your field becomes. And as you lift higher and higher, a beautiful teacher or guide reaches down to draw you up even higher. Opening you to the higher spaces. This might be a part of you, your own higher self, our own multidimensional essence. And notice as your energy begins to blend and harmonize with the energy of this teacher. And just surrender to the experience, allowing yourself to be in the spiritual resonance with something larger than yourself. And breathe. Bathe in the stillness and the light. And notice the energy that you hold together with this teacher. And we open to the light of spirit, higher consciousness, and greater will. And notice your energy field, the colors, the patterns, and the radiance of that field. And this is how we connect heaven and earth. And as that radiant light that you are, we're slowly going to come down, honoring and offering appreciation, the teacher, the guide that works with us, and offering gratitude to that connection to a cosmic source. As we learn to resonate with spirit and to then bring it into our world. Feel yourself gently coming down, gently coming down. And bringing down your radiant light in through the top of your head and into your heart. And from your heart out to every cell of your body. Every cell. And extend your light down the base of your spine and deep into the earth. Anchoring your light deep into the earth. And bring your awareness back to your physical body, feeling the energy circulating like rivers of light throughout your body. Rivers of light throughout your body. And slowly bringing your awareness back into your room. Taking your time coming back. Gently coming back. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So it was a very short but sweet meditation. And I will open this up for some questions, comments, any questions or anything you want to even share.
just want to say thank you, Irene. It's just been great to give a lot more frame of reference to what I'm already doing, but with more confidence now to see some of those diagrams and slides and how you're speaking to it is really resonating with my practice. So I can go out with a little bit more confidence. I tend to work in this way and then find out later.
Right. Okay. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. Anybody want to share? Question, thought?
Everyone's a bit dreamy, I think.
Yeah, that can be. It's hard to come back. And keep in mind, this is just an introduction. So it's just to kind of let you know that there is this way to work. I actually just started a program. I mean, I've been teaching this program for a long time, but I just started a new cycle of it through EMDR, applications of mindful awareness and resonance to EMDR, or to psychotherapy, actually. So I offer that for people who want more of an experience with this. So while you're coming back to Earth, I think what I'll do, if it's okay, Lani, I'm going to put up my contact information again. Okay, let me just.
I'll send it all out in the follow-up email as well.
Oh, that would be good. That would be good. Well, let me, oops, this is not my contact information. Hold on. No, just 1 second. Here we go.
Yes, I can ask one, Irene, just around any tips or guidance for working this way for clients who might be atheist or have no, might be a bit triggered or reluctant to work in this way.
Well, in working this way, this is really about what's happening for the therapist internally. I don't say a lot to the client about it, and I wait and I see where they are in their own process. So on my website, I do indicate that I work in a transpersonal way and I describe transpersonal psychology, but I don't use language that they don't use. So if someone is not ready to work this way, then I don't use that language. I had a client come to me one time and she called me and she said, "You were referred to me. I want to see you, but I have to tell you something." And I said, "Well, what is that?" Now, I'm part of a holistic center. It's not a secret that I teach meditation. She said to me, "I'm not spiritual." I said, "It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to be spiritual." And so she came into therapy and, we didn't really talk about anything she wasn't ready to talk about. But about 6 months into the process, she started reading spiritual books. And when I did my study, this is what all the therapists said. They said, we don't have to say a word about spirituality. The client tends to go there because we're there internally. And that is what happens. So this is really about what you're doing as a therapist in the shared field. Some clients that come in and they're familiar with meditation or energy work, they might say something more about the field or the energy or whatever, and then I'll speak their language. But I don't introduce a new language. It really is strictly about where they are. And we're working behind the scenes in this way.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Irene, you mentioned I am love, I am light, I am. I think there were 3 other phrases before that. What was that?
Well, what I was saying is that, when you look at that 6-pointed star that I put up, that diagram, we're taking non-local mind and we're overlaying it with brain, mind, and relationship. And so when you have a client that comes in with, something like, I'm not lovable, and then they process their information, they process their trauma, they realize they are lovable. But I don't stop there. And I'll just say this because this is a really important point. In the installation phase, I don't stop until the client stops. So if they get to I'm lovable, that's not the end. That's the beginning of a whole new phase. So they'll go from I'm not lovable to I am lovable to I am love to I am light to I am. And that is that soul awareness. That's where that comes in. And so I really do a more prolonged installation phase. I bring it into the body. I find, where in the body they're holding the strength of those statements. How do they feel in their body? And if the client can go there, I'll say, how do you feel it in your energy field? If they're familiar with that, how do you sense this in your energy field? And I'll work with traumatic memory that way too. We'll bring it right into the world of energy and symbols if the client is able to go there. Sometimes they might not talk about energy at all, but I'll say to them something like, if you were to paint a picture of this negative belief, what would it look like? Where is it in your body? What color is it? I'm really asking them to draw on their connection to their energy field, but I don't have to put it that way. Okay. So does that answer your question, Bonnie?
That's perfectly wonderfully. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
It's lovely to be with you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to bring up? Anything? I know it is hard to come back from those spaces. Well, if you decide you want more and you want to learn more, my contact information is up there. You can go to my website and sign on to my mailing list, or I think Lani is going to be giving me the email list. So you'll be getting some announcements about some of the things I teach. Every Monday night since 1986, I've been teaching the medicine wheel. Seriously, without a break, without a break.
I was born.
I know. I've been around for a while. And I started traveling to South America, during that time. And I came back and I started teaching the medicine wheel. We spent 4 weeks in each direction of the wheel, and every direction represents different work. So obviously I've been in the medicine wheel longer than anyone in my group, but I have some people in my group who's been with me for years, and it's never the same work because the energy is changing on the planet. Consciousness is changing. We're changing. We keep going deeper and deeper and higher and higher. And especially during this time, which is a whole other lecture on the acceleration of consciousness that's happening on our planet. There's only so much I could fit into 2 hours. So
thank you. Yeah, I'll have to check out the medicine wheel. That's just come into my field recently. So I'll check that out.
Yeah, great.
Well, thank you.
And go ahead. Yes,
no, thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to present. And I know others are going to be watching this on video, and those that came in late, I'm so sorry. We didn't realize that Australia changed its time. So it is recorded. You can watch the part that you missed. And I appreciate you all being here.
Thank you. Good weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
See you all soon.
Thank you so much, Irene and Lani.
Thank you.
Aho.
You're welcome. Aho.
Aho.
Thank you all very much.